Welcome and good morning. This is Jim Ransom with another edition of Morning Jim. Today's program I'm calling Potpourri, which just means a conjuries of things that are otherwise unconnected. That's not quite fair. I found out after I had finally chosen the poems in the program, because in fact there is a theme which is slightly hidden. I suspect many of you will figure it out by the time we get through the program. Our first poem today is by an English poet of the World War I era. One more sip, and then I'll be through with this. Okay. His name is Edward Thomas, and the poem is called The Owl. I should say that, ironically, this poem I found in a new edition of a book called American Poets that just came out, American Poets. But of course, Edward Thomas is a British poet. And I'll tell you later how he found his way into a book called American Poets. So now it's time to read this poem. Downhill I came, hungry, and yet not starved, cold, yet had heat within me that was proof against the north wind, tired, yet so that rest had seemed the sweetest thing under a roof. Then at the inn I had food, fire, and rest, knowing how hungry, cold, and tired was I. All of the night was quite barred out except an owl's cry, a most melancholy cry, shaken out long and clear upon the hill, no merry note, nor cause of merriment, but one telling me plain what I escaped and others could not that night, as in I went. And salted was my food and my repose, salted and sobered too, by the bird's voice, speaking for all who lay under the stars, soldiers and poor, unable to rejoice. Okay. This poem has some interesting emanations. The poet's relieved to have found some comfort when his body has been tested by the north wind and lack of food. And at the end, he is reminded that under the stars lay soldiers and poor, unable to rejoice. Let me add that Edward Thomas was writing this, as you can figure, during the Great War. It began in 1914 and didn't end until 1918 after America came into it. Edward Thomas didn't go into the British armed services right away. He couldn't make a living as a poet with the war going on, so he finally enlisted in July 1916. And I doubt if it was entirely for the money, which would not have been much at all. He fought for months in France and then was killed at the Battle of Arras in April 1917, less than a year after he enlisted. So that's a sad story, however you look at it, either the poem or the poet's life. Moving on, I'm going to display another poem about a tragedy occurring half a world and nearly 100 years later. It's called Flood. And it was from the same book I told you about, American Poets. This time, it really is an American poet. Ed Madden is a teacher at a college in the South. And he wrote this poem, Flood, in March 2011. To the south, the ditch is out. The field, awash with brown water, white in morning light, the horizon a furred ridge of dark green trees that traces the turn of drowned banks, the line and curve of rumbled ditch, all around the waters rising, the cache, the white, the black, bayou de view, and on the news, sandbags in Jacksonport, Pocahontas, Bayou de View, and Paragold. Roads washed out. The interstate closed. Aunt Elaine shows us photos on her phone of the levee around her house. Sandbag circles at every door. The porch. The road west, our way out, is underwater too. No tractors or a jacked-up four-wheel drive truck get through. Flooded to just beyond there where the old Stitt house used to be, its dooryard garden, now clumps of damp jonquils, bloomed out and brown, a sodden lot of weeds and grass, thick-stitched with vetch. The postman won't come through it. The flag in the box up 3 days now. And we have to drive out to pick up the hospice nurse. Her little car parked off the blacktop a mile away. On the way back, I see a coot swimming in the field. A flourish of blackbirds swerving along the road's washed-out shoulder. And when I park in the backyard, we can hear the dove that lives there above us in the pines asking, "Who? Oh, who? Who?" So, a beautiful description of a flood, I would say. And the birds are here, too, flying about, perhaps searching for food or a roost. And the dove. Is she asking who will survive? Finally, here's a poem I wrote just 2 days ago, celebrating, you might say, the season we are in right now. And it's called Fall Window. Leaves yellow like large slices of fromage fall flip-flopping beneath the catalpa tree, all in one day, leaving bereft the brown pods hanging as ornaments throughout the winter, suspecting they have a purpose next year, not knowing what it might be. Catalpa seems sad, looking at dancing lady just ahead, whose leaves are green after 3 nights of worsening frost. Still green, limbs drooping, awaiting the tremor that makes them waltz, and maybe shimmy if it is a bebop breeze. Hemlocks around her, to watch her jazzy limbs jumping as weather orchestras strike up, led by the jays who sit waiting in her crown, anxious to announce the next set. Okay, the next set will be winter, of course. I saw this scene out my bedroom window. All of a sudden, on a windless morning, the dry catalpa tree leaves just came down almost simultaneously. It was quite a sight, and they lay in a pile at the foot of the tree. And a few yards away, we have a tree called the Dancing Lady. It's probably a member of the Corylus family, and it has a lot of twisted branches, typical of that family, and the total overall shape is like a lady in a ball gown, with branches sloping to the ground. It's popular with birds, and the leaves dance, even in a slight breeze. It is a favorite of the jays, who sit in the top of the tree and cry out defiantly several times a day. So what is the commonality in all these poems? Well, it is the birds who populate the different parts of the stories being told. In the owl, it is the namesake bird who sets the mood for the poem. Speaking for all who lay under the stars, unable to rejoice, is the quote from the poem itself. We've already discussed the message of the birds in flood to some extent. The coot swimming around in the floodwaters, a typical thing for a bird of no particular beauty or purpose to be doing. And then the lonely dove sitting in the tree and crying out, who, the coo of the dove. It can be seen as a symbol of loneliness, or it might be asking in this case, who will survive the flood? And then in my own poem, we meet jays, whose piercing cries are seldom soothing. The jays perhaps are anxious to announce the next set, and that will be winter, of course. So perhaps we can say that the common theme of these various poems is messages from the birds. Have a great day, and let's hope we have mild weather all the way up to Thanksgiving, but let's not count on it. Let me know your poetic preferences, and I'm going to break one of my rules today and tell you that next week I'll be talking about the changes that have occurred in poetry in my lifetime, and that is the gradual dropping away of rhyme as a major connection with poetry. Think about it this way. Poems have always had rhymes, haven't they? Well, not necessarily. We'll go into that, however, next time. And there has been quite a battle over the years between poets who write rhyming poems and poets who wouldn't be caught dead with a rhyme. We'll talk a little about that next time we meet. So long, and have a great week. And I hope you'll be here again next week to see what turns up. Bye now.